And I was really interested in this intersection of tech and peace. Really just what does that even mean? And for me, I think the closest I could get to peace was that it was about bringing more love into the world.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Bloem, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Okay, good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce himself. Lawrence, please go ahead.
Hey, it's great to be here. When you said introduce myself, what would you like me to include in that introduction?
Hey, it's your time. So, I leave it up to my guests. Yeah. Some
Sure.
are,
Well,
starting straight away, and some are saying, well, my name is Lawrence. Yeah. And then I will ask you a question if you don't say
sounds
anything
good.
else. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I think the main identity that I've recently been embracing over the last decade has been the one of the co-founders of Sutra, which is a social learning platform. But beyond that, I might say that I'm a devout yogi, and that I spend a lot of time really thinking about how to find that intersection of the work that I do and the purpose that I feel, and my relationship to my practice.
Mm, yeah. And, we met each other well, no, that's not true. We did not meet. But we were together at the Inner Development Goals Summit, where there were a lot of people. And we should have met, but we didn't. But I'm happy that we are able to talk with each other now. Um, and I want to know everything about Sutra and your take on the Inner Development Goals. But before we go there, Lawrence, I would like to, and the listeners especially as well, is where were you born and raised? Tell us a bit about your journey and how might that have led to what you're doing today.
Mm, mm. Yeah, sure. My background is kind of particularly complex. People
Mm,
always ask you like where you're from, and I've never been able to really answer that
yeah.
without a pretty long explanation. But I'll illustrate, which is that I was born in Germany to a German diplomat who passed away when I was 5, and
Mm,
then we had moved to Australia when I was 3, and so my mother met a Swiss diplomat, and we continued traveling. So I grew up in Germany, Australia, Morocco, South Korea, Canada, Switzerland. Ended up going to college in the U.S. But just to add some more nuance there,
mm,
my mother, um, she's Russian, so I grew up speaking Russian, although I never lived in Russia. I was born in Germany, but I don't speak German. I live in Germany now. I have a German passport, and I spent most of my life going to American schools.
mm,
So, I remember when I left Australia, I was 10 years old. I had an Australian accent. I remember being made fun of for my Australian accent at the American school I went to in Morocco. Now I obviously no longer have an Australian accent. But basically from the age of 10 onwards, I went to American schools everywhere. I went to college in the US. I lived in the US for 20 years, but I'm definitely not American. So, this kind of interesting cultural intersections that have, left me without a particular, you could say, national identity.
So I'm always fascinated by that. And but the question that I ask, and because I also asked that to my kids who have, um, also had a journey not as you know diverse as yours. They lived in a couple of countries only. But anyway, the question that I would like to ask you: so where is home?
So to be honest, um, uh, where I feel most at home is at Burning Man, which is a festival in Nevada that I've been going to for 14 years, and just literally this year we were there in August, September. My wife and I were talking about this and just reflecting on how That's the one place on this planet that I feel a sense of belonging, where I just feel like, wow, that's it's really in my experience at Burning Man that I understood what it means for somebody to feel belonging to a place, you know. And I think there's some people they grew up somewhere, and so they're like, I'm from Sweden, you know, that's where I feel most at home. That's where I feel like, you know, home. So for me, I think in a broader dimension, like for the last maybe decade or so, I've been telling people that, you know, someone asks you where you're from, the one place the one kind of space that I feel, oh, this is where I'm from, is Earth, you know, as a whole, because I feel like that's where I've kind of lived all over the Earth. Even in the U.S., I lived in Boston, Hawaii, San Francisco, New York. So, you know, lots of diversity. So on a macro level,
Mhm.
Earth. On a more micro level, certainly as far as like culture, that I just the place where I just feel like, wow, like this is home. The 7 days or 10 days of a year that I spend there, it would be Burning Man.
And if I ask you, because I've never been there myself, because I know a couple of people that have been there. But if you have to explain then that experience to folks who don't know anything about Burning Man, yeah, how would you describe it?
Hmm. You know, it's hard. It's one of those things that you really can't explain. You really have to experience it. Part of it is that there's 70,000 people that come together under radically different agreements that we do in the default world, right? There's no money being exchanged, so nothing is for sale. Everything is gifted. There's a culture of radical self-expression, radical self-reliance. um, you know, I mean, these are kind of nuances that we can point at and say, oh, yeah, so I get that. But I think the thing about it that's just impossible to really get is what happens when you're in a space of 70,000 people really um, kind of experiencing them in themselves and each other in a different way. And that's the heart of it. You know, for me, it's almost like I almost think of it as like as a truly religious experience. You know, in the sense of you really discover something about your humanity. I mean, for sure, for me, as far as my spiritual path, so much of who I've become, so much of what I've discovered about myself, and what I've really understood about the possibility of being human has been through my experiences at Burning Man.
Hmm. Okay. Um, by the way, is that the same for your wife, Natasha? If I ask you
I
her
think
the question,
Well, it's a little bit different in the sense
uh
of, does she feel the same level of connection to Burning Man? Yes. Her kind of identity story is a little
uh
bit different because
uh
she grew up in Russia until she was 10. You know, she's been kind of surrounded by Russian heritage at a much deeper level than I have. So I think the question of like where you're from is more clear for her. She grew up in Russia until she was 10, and then she spent the rest of her time in the US. So at the level of, you know, where are you from? Where is home? I think likely she would answer Moscow. At the level of, you know, where like do you feel most connected to yourself, maybe most alive? I think that she might answer Burning Man.
and just for the listeners, yeah, I'm asking that question about Natasha because the two of you co-founded Sutra, and we will talk about Sutra. So I know you're. Well, I mean, it should be for all couples that are close, but definitely you guys are close because you also work together, right? So which not all couples can do, which is kind of maybe an interesting aspect to hear from you as well, how you do that to a 24/7 maybe talking about work or not. But Lawrence, do you have any siblings?
No, I'm an only child.
Okay, okay, and because then I'm always interested in to see, oh, how did your siblings then experience that? So also not from, your second the second marriage of your mom. So half brothers,
I have
sisters,
some
or
some half siblings. Yeah,
yeah.
there were I wouldn't say like we never grew up together. We saw each other,
Okay,
you know, once every few years. So these are not like
no,
super close relationships, good relationships, but we're just, you know, not super close.
yeah. let us go, rather quickly though to Sutra is because I'm really fascinated by what you have, what you guys have developed and the potential it has. But how did it come about? And
Mm.
explain maybe also then, because I know what Sutra is about, maybe for the listeners in terms of, yeah, how if you have never heard, never seen anything, how would you explain it and to a person what you are doing with Sutra?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll start with some of the background story because it's also related to Burning Man. In 2011, I had a mystical experience, and it's kind of hard to explain, but the the heart of it was that I felt a visceral sense of world peace. I had never thought about peace before; it wasn't something that was on my mind. But I came out of that experience feeling um, like a profound sense of purpose to be in service of peace. And I wasn't even particularly spiritual before that time. I remember, up until my late 20s, I was quite firmly agnostic, and there was something about that experience that really woke me up spiritually. And so I came out of that, and I think a lot of my friends would thought I was a little crazy because I was like, I'm moving to New York. At that time, I was living in San Francisco. I was like, I'm moving to New York City, and I'm going to work on world peace. And they're like, okay, what does that mean? I was like, I don't know, but that's what I'm doing. Um, and so, I've been doing tech startups since 2004. And I was really interested in this intersection of tech and peace. And really just what does that even mean? And for me, I think the closest I could get to peace was that it was about bringing more love into the world. And so at that time, I was working on an e-commerce platform, and I kind of shifted a little bit to be um, an e-commerce platform where people could cross promote each other's products. And so the idea was, how do we create networks of mutual support where people are sharing knowledge and resources in the context of their micro business. So that was like 2011, 12, 13. I raised $500,000 at the time to work on that project. It didn't end up working out, and kind of went through a bit of a dark night of the soul, really wondering, like, how do we create this more love and connection in the world through some sort of online vehicle. Um, so in 2015, someone told me about Otto Scharmer's work, program called the U Lab from the Presencing Institute, and Natasha and I enrolled in that. I think it was their first large scale um, cohort of that experience. So maybe 30,000 people participating from all over the world, and they put us into small groups, and it was one of the first times where I felt a deep level of meaningful connection with strangers online. And so there was something there for me that was kind of an epiphany. Like, we'd spent a few years really trying to find like authentic, real human connection online, and here all of a sudden I discovered it. And so I think the epiphany was um, that the way that people feel connected is through small groups, and that a learning experience can be a vehicle for people to practice new ways of being together. So I wrote the first line of code for what is now Sutra shortly after that, really looking at how do we create scalable small group learning experiences. And pretty much everything we do with Sutra today has been the, the kind of uh, iteration of that inquiry around how do you create meaningful connection online, and how can learning experiences cultivate relational capacities at scale, the capacity for presence, attunement, shared understanding, deep listening. All of these qualities are generally something you can't really read about in a book, but you really need to practice with other people. So they have a certain relational dimension to them as far as the cultivation of the capacity, and so that whole territory around how a learning experience can be designed to cultivate those capacities has been at the heart of our work. So I think on the most basic level, what Sutra is, it's a kind of social learning platform that helps you organize anything related to a learning experience, whether it's a cohort-based experience where you have people registering, and you want to organize your content and material in an online space, um, or a self-paced experience where we've been doing some really unique work with AI, where AI kind of functions like a facilitator, and again, really looking at how do you surface the insight and understanding of the participants in a way that creates meaningful connection, deep conversation, and shared understanding.
Hmm. Wow. Um, I know what Sutra is about. Maybe some folks, after listening to you, okay, an online experience, communicating with each other. Is that Slack?
Is that Slack? So the best way to understand Sutra in a way, if you just take away any sort of kind of
Hmm.
philosophical thing, is it's a kind of what you get if you combine Slack with Notion. So Notion is kind of
Uh-huh.
like a wiki-like product. And so Sutra makes it really easy to organize any amount of content and
Hmm.
conversation spaces.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's helpful for me. I also think for the listeners. Um, so yeah. So what do you ultimately? I know that you would like to work on peace, right? Um, but are you setting some intermediate goals as well, or you just go with the flow and see what comes on the path? Yeah. Is there do you have a 5, 10 years what you would like to see,
Mm.
or is it much more open?
I think it's a little bit of both in terms of continually um, mm, setting a trajectory towards this question of, is what we're doing really creating relational awareness? Are we really cultivating relational capacities? What does that even mean? What does that look like in practice? And then on the business side, things like, oh, you want to get to, say, 10,000 paid accounts, within some sort of time frame. I think, part of the challenge around these kinds of things is that it can be difficult to quantify relational development in a way that's really meaningful because it's a little more subtle. Um, where, where we're moving towards continually as far as a goal is an ecosystem of relational spaces, which means basically that we have um, several thousand creators that are offering um, experiences that you might call relational or developmental in some way. So
Hmm.
that they're somehow creating connection or helping people cultivate relational capacities or somehow developmental. And that there's some sort of cross flow between those experiences. So there's an opportunity to discover other experiences. That there's an opportunity for creators to collaborate and support each other. So all of these are dimensions that we're kind of continually prototyping around and experimenting with. But I think maybe on the most basic metric right now, like one of our goals right now um, is to get to 2,000 paying clients by the end of 2026.
Okay. And it's are you on track there? On.
Ask me at the end of 2026. But yeah, I think we're I think a big part of running any project, right, is about rapidly learning and continually focusing.
Uh-huh.
So especially with something like ours that's more values based, and people are always asking you what problem are you solving, and so some sort of problem like, oh, we're working towards world peace is nobody um, very few people kind of wake up and think, oh, today I really need to figure out this world peace thing, right? So it's not a lived
uh,
problem that people have. Like a lived problem that people have is I really need to figure out how to get more clients for my course or my community, or I really need to figure out how to most people, right? For many people, it's like something related to sales, marketing,
uh-huh.
generating more income, because everything else is kind of secondary after that. So a lot of what we're continually navigating is this intersection between the kind of purpose-driven aspiration we have to cultivate relational capacities, and the kind of lived problems that people have, which is, I need a simple way to launch a program. I need a way to be able to generate more income, more customers, more clients, and then like ultimately all of that translates to being able to have impact. That people want to have meaningful impact in their lives. But if they're unable to generate income through that process, that doesn't become very sustainable. So I think that, as far as the most practical, tangible expression of the problem that we're continually leaning into solving, is beyond just being able to get your content up on a site. How can we also help you reach more people and generate more revenue through your efforts? Especially, I'd say like 100% of the people that use Sutra are doing some sort of what we call heart-centered work. Like, so I call us an opinionated platform
Yeah.
in that, like you mentioned Slack earlier. I don't think Slack really cares what kind of projects use Slack. And I'd say 100% of the people that are using Sutra are doing some sort of positive social impact work.
Okay. Can I would like to ask you a question then about Sutra and where it could go, because you mentioned, you worked for many years in the startup business, and a kind of common path there is, you start something and then ultimately you sell it, and then it's gone, right? And then you start something else. Um, do you see that happening also with Sutra, or is this no, this is my, this is my baby, and I will keep it with me, even though it's growing. But because there is often within that path, there is also a loss, in a sense that, yeah, you invent something, it's not yours anymore, and it goes in a direction that you had never, and not necessarily a good thing. you know, yeah. How do you are you thinking about that, or how do you would you look at it?
My intention is to build a lasting company that touches millions of people's lives.
Hmm.
Beyond that, what that looks like, I'm less um, uh, like fixated on that. My intention is not to grow Sutra and have a big exit and move on with the project. I want to build something that um, genuinely delivers on this promise of cultivating relational capacities at scale. Like, when I look at the world right now and everything going on in the world, for me, and maybe this is a radically simplified worldview, I'd say the number one challenge is that we simply lack the capacity to navigate differences with intelligence, and that to me is what relational intelligence, relational capacities are about. The capacity to be with life as it is, and to navigate that in a way that that uh, is harmonious and coherent. And how can we do that at scale? I think that's a really important question today.
Okay. Um, yeah, I would like us to go slowly to the inner development goals, because that's also an important aspect of the work of Sutra as well, and of you personally, I think. But before we go there, I mean, the IDGs are a result of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and so I think, there's a lot to say against it. I mean, it's not perfect, but what I like about the Sustainable Development Goals is that at least, you know, um, many human beings around the world, came together with a concern that, we have made a world that's not sustainable. We need to think about humanity, about the planet, and maybe those 17 goals that they came up with are too many, but at least there was discussion and to come to some kind of a consensus and compromise there. Um, my question always for my guests is, are you aware about the Sustainable Development Goals? One, and second, if you are, yeah, what do you like the listeners to know about the SDGs? And if you're not, yeah, any reflections on the idea of those goals that are set and that we should reach before 2030?
Hmm. I'm aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. I would not call myself an expert in them,
Hmm.
nor am I kind of deeply attentive to the progress that we're making on them. I do very much resonate with the intention of the inner development goals and the assertion that in order for us to, I think the Sustainable Development Goals represent a desire to create a much more sustainable possibility on this planet for how we live and develop as a species. And so I very much resonate with the idea that the only way to do that is through inner development. And I would you maybe go so far as to say that with the right inner development, the sustainable development goals would dissolve. The necessity for them would dissolve because those same problems would no longer be problems. So, as far as having the importance and the value of having goals that shape our current priorities, I'd say they're very, very important. But then I would say that the having this inner development at scale, which
Mm.
I think there's so many different ways to describe this, right? So when I say relational intelligence and someone else says inner development goals, I think we're all pointing at the same thing. We're all pointing at basically a more conscious, more aware way of being in relationship to ourselves, each other, and the planet. And that if we're able to accomplish this at scale, as in the majority of human beings have this awareness, and ultimately, you could even say have an awareness of the true nature of their identity. Who am I? Like,
Mm.
who am I really? Am I this like separate, distinct entity that has to defend and protect itself from the rest of life, or is my identity somehow deeply interwoven with what I'm encountering? And when that understanding of who we are becomes embodied in a way of self-realization, then a lot of how we relate to other people and how we respond to conflict and challenge also shifts. And so if we had that level of awareness, say, present in all of the world's political leadership today, um, how different would the way that we respond to crisis and challenge be? Um, and would we need things like the Sustainable Development Goals? I mean, sure, maybe and initially to set some sort of targets and metrics, but ultimately, our way of seeing the world would naturally dictate our response to the world. And I think this is the kind of the primacy, the primal importance of inner development.
Mm. And just for the listeners, because you are, you know, actually, um, really in line is how people that were involved in developing the inner development goals, what they said, the 17 goals that we set, we are not reaching those, or we're behind. On average, only 15 to 70%, because we did not pay attention to the ability, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as communities to work on those systems and structure changes. And I would like to um, go back to, I heard you say, when you were talking about Burning Man, and that you had a almost religious experience, although you were not religious. So, um, yeah, is the inner development goal, is that about religion? Is that about spirituality? Or is it the same, the words? Yeah, can you explain a bit you know, about that experience and how you see this?
I think it all depends on what you mean by those words.
Hmm.
So religion, as it is commonly understood on this planet, is a form of institutional, organizational. structured relationship to God. And it kind of gives you a definition of what that means and how you should approach that. Um, um, Spiritual, I'd say, is, as the word is commonly used, is about, having an orientation to life that is beyond the purely material. And then, things like the inner development goals, I would not say that they are um, overtly spiritual, but I would say that the ultimate um, path of awareness is self-realization, um, and awareness of God. You know, that might mean very different things to different people, right? And so saying something like that can be provocative in some way, but ultimately, at least in my personal experience, um, God is not something that you believe in. God is something that you directly experience and become present to, so that it doesn't become a question of, do you believe in God or don't you believe in God? But rather it becomes something that you become present to, something that you become aware of, and also that it is something that you kind of that continually opens up as far as um, the relationship between who you consider yourself to be, who you understand yourself to be, and what life is.
Thanks for that, Lorenz. Um, I would like to, I mean, the fact that you use the word God um, is interesting because I felt, and I put a personal spin to it. When we were in during the Inner Development Goal Summit, the words religion and God seem to be kind of, that people have an allergic reaction to that.
Mm.
Um, while I think, okay, but if you think about inner development, that's kind of part of an experience as well. And the example, and why I think that, because for me it was interesting. In the pre-summit there was a workshop that we organized that we called, um, we had the word religion in it, and on the adjacent room there was a similar workshop, but they had called their session Ubuntu.
Mm.
And we had one participant, and their room was full. And but reading it, I was thinking, okay, basically we're touching upon a lot of the same issues. Do you want to? So that's kind of interesting. And yeah, so did you have this similar feeling in terms that certain things are still not discussed in the inner development goal, world and space? And do you have an explanation for this?
Mm.
Why maybe there is an allergic reaction to the words religion and God?
I think people, talk about what they're ready to talk about, and also um, we're talking about things that are very complex, that
Hmm.
that have a lot of attached meaning to them. When I use the word God or religion, it it means something. It can mean something entirely different for another person. Um, I think that yeah, how we navigate these conversations is in itself a form of uh, inner development, right? Because ultimately, when we talk about God and religion on this planet, many times we're talking about a form of identity. I'm Christian, I'm Jewish, I'm Muslim. This is we're talking about like what we identify with, and in a way, uh, that process of identification in a subtle way expresses a certain separation or distinction. You know, my God is different from your God, rather than um, kind of all inclusive orientation. And I think how we encounter that within ourselves and how we respond to it within others, because you know, if I point at someone and say, "Hey, you know, you've got this religious orientation that's excluding me, now I'm going to exclude you," right? It becomes more of the same, right? It's so easy um, to other in response to othering. You know, then you have something called anti-racism. You know, it's like we've got this othering over there, and we're gonna other it, and that's going to be our response. And I think this is like a very tricky territory, because on the one hand we want to obviously cultivate awareness around othering, in whatever version. You know, I'm not saying that every institutional religion is an expression of othering, but in a subtle way, you know, many religions, uh, you know, kind of create a certain exclusivity in their relationship to spirituality or God or their version of it. And so um, how we become present to that, how we respond to othering in a way that's inclusive, in a way that you can look at an expression of God, an expression of religion, and appreciate that this is an expression of God, that this is an expression of worshiping, of being in relationship to life, even if it isn't entirely yours. I think all of that speaks to like a deeper, more inclusive um, relationship to all of life, that we can include othering as an expression of life, and in doing so begin to include more of life and its incredible diversity in our experience. And I think this is really, you know, at the heart. The theme for the IDG this year was bridging polarities, and so, you know, on this question of how do we bridge these polarities? How do we navigate this with intelligence without creating more polarity? So I think this is very much at the heart of inner development, is really cultivating the capacity to hold space for polarity, to hold space to recognize that um, someone else's point of view or someone else's orientation to life um, is also part of life, exactly as it is, even if it's completely different from your orientation to life.
I hope that with this podcast, I'm contributing to connecting people, you know, and that is a little step within the process. Um, and I have also questions, you know, trying to do that. And one of the ways is that I'm asking my previous guest to have a question for the next guest. And so the previous guest has a question for you.
What was the last thing that you changed your mind about?
um, so yeah, I was thinking about this question. I don't change my mind about too many things. Um, I think, and yeah, I want to give that a little bit of context first, because it wasn't always this way. But I consider one of my superpowers, you could say, is this capacity for attunement, and very present to whatever I encounter, um, and present to my own orientation to it, present to it in my body, in my emotional space, and um, I, I sense a level of um, intelligence in that, in the sense of like I'm pretty good at getting a sense of the way something is, whether it's a person or a situation, in and uh, that doesn't often fail me, and that certainly has not been the case for most of my life. But let's say for the last 5 years or so, I like to think that, or at least my experience has been that it's often quite accurate. But one thing that I changed my mind on, and this is probably um, I'm sure there are many listeners that will not agree with me. And this is probably gonna cause some problems for myself here. But um, uh, I think there was a moment in time where I was not. Um, I was just wondering what happened to Elon Musk. And this is a while ago, long before the Trump the political thing, but it was kind of more when he was getting really involved in crypto and acquiring Twitter. And I really um, had a lot of respect for Musk earlier, and then kind of like he just got really flashy and in the news, and I was like, what's going on here? And so I kind of he kind of I didn't quite resonate with him as much. But recently, I've really changed my orientation to him. And I know many people, are deeply, I don't know, challenged by his association with Trump. But um, I think when I look at a person, when I experience any public figure, I try to really feel that person. I try to really feel where they're coming from, what they're about, um, to really listen to what they're saying. It's easy to take sound bites out of context, like someone says, "Oh, Elon's a Nazi. Look at the salute he did." To look at a person in a broader context, to really ask yourself, is that really what that movement was about, or is particular soundbite really what this person is saying without the context of um, who they are, how they show up in everyday life, what they talk about, what they share about, really looking at the full spectrum of their history, and I think most recently, as I really came to look at Elon, and just really like listen to him talk and the way he expresses things, the way he talks about things. Um, I just recognize a level of purity about him. He's just the way he is. He's wacky. He's a genius in his own way, and I genuinely believe this person um, really, really wants to contribute to humanity. And he's willing to put himself on a line in a way that few others are. And he also has this incredible capacity, like an intelligence and the capacity to make things happen on this planet. So I've come to really respect him again. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Mm. Wow. This is for me. This is really interesting. One of the uh, things, premise that I try to follow with this particular podcast is something that came out of the philosopher Ken Wilber, and that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. So, which I think also helps in terms of, when you're trying to look at polarization. So nobody can be wrong 100% of the time. So in that sense, I'm trying to listen to you and, understand where you come from. For me, this is still very difficult. As you know, I come from the NGO sector, and basically he destroyed USAID. And a lot of the programs that we have been working on for the last couple of decades are gone as a result of what he has achieved. So I understand in terms of listen to somebody, but there are also actions that, accompanied certain words. Um, so, and anyway, I appreciate your sharing that. I'm only warning you. I know many of my listeners
Oh, this is what I
will
was saying. I know I'm
will not.
digging myself a hole by sharing this, honestly. So, but
Having said that, serious, Lawrence, it's we don't have to. This podcast is also trying to show that you don't have to agree with everything my guests are saying, but be open to an opinion. So, and that's what I try to do as a host as well. I had to make this comment though, because what he did through my sector. It's not my sector, but what I've been trying to do for many years. A lot has been destroyed, and very difficult to rebuild that. And that is from all the work that we did around USAID, from HIV/AIDS to name it, hunger and yeah. Anyway, um, your question for the next guest.
I think it's related. Yeah, so I have a particular definition of humility. And my definition is a lasting awareness of my own subtle arrogance. Um, but it took me a while to really connect with that. Humility was a virtue that a lot of people talked about how it was transformational in their lives. And I didn't really get it, in a way that I think there's a number of words like that one might encounter, right? Maybe like humility, innocence, respect. What do these words actually mean? Beyond the dictionary definition, in a way that um, comes alive in our lived experience in a very personal way, because what humility means to another person may not be what humility means to you as a virtue that you can really understand and embody. So the question would be, what does humility mean to you?
Great. I like that. I really like that question. Um,
And just to touch on the Elon thing, I
yeah.
recognize that many might consider my perspective arrogant. So, this lands on like I really appreciate what you said, that um, there's so much more that we do not know than we do about any situation, and even in any action or any person. Um, there's a shadow. There are many dimensions to the consequences of our actions, and many different interpretations. One interpretation is government efficiency. Another interpretation is, reduction of much needed and very hard for worked for aid around the world, right? And so how we balance those things, how any one person makes sense of them. I think this is the complexity of the world that we live in. And humility for me is really about having a relationship with your own point of view. A willingness to recognize that your point of view is situated, that your point of view is limited, maybe even extremely limited, and that in approaching any issue in the world, like Russia, Ukraine, Palestine, Israel, political situation in the U.S., the political situation in the world, that um, there's so much more that we're not aware of, right? And to me, that's the best wisdom that I can bring to a situation, right? To begin with, that there's so much more that I'm not aware of, right? It is because I think that I've changed my mind about Elon. Doesn't mean that I like resonate with the consequences of some of his actions, or that I don't have the deepest compassion for many of the people that have been affected. Many of the people on our platform whose programs have been cut. I think part of what the best that we can the best that we can do, as in our own humanity, is to really hold space for the complexity of our own orientation, of what even what we don't know about ourselves. There's so much that we don't know about ourselves. And that I don't think that's a bad thing. But this is what I mean by a lasting awareness of my own subtle arrogance. It is not a condemnation of my arrogance. It is not this is such a bad thing that I have judgment and bias, right? And sometimes we respond to our judgment and bias in others or in ourselves with condemnation. This shouldn't be there. I shouldn't be so judgmental. And in that process, of course, we're just doing the same thing, right? So there's something really powerful in being able to say, hey, as a human being, I cannot help but have bias. I cannot help but have judgment. I cannot help but other in some way or another. And the best that I can do is to embrace that with awareness. Because if I have awareness, I can allow all of that to be what it is, and still engage with life with as much wisdom as I possibly can. And so I think for me, this really kind of lands at the heart of many of the things we're exploring here. Like that, this is the power of inner development. That we can hold space for these polarities with the deepest humanity
Yeah.
and humility.
No, and I absolutely appreciate what you said. I mean, that's why I started with because I'm about everybody's perspective is true, albeit partial. It's very easy to say, and then when you're confronted, um, how do you look for that, that space where you can agree on something, where you can start a dialogue. Um, and that's that's what's happened, as a result of your statement for me. So that's there is something theoretical, and then there is something practically. What does that mean? But I do think it's important to look at context, listen to perspectives, and again, you don't have to, at the end of the day, to agree. But there are things that you can still do together, and work on, and make it part of the learning and the growth further that we all have to continue to work on, I think. So, yeah, um, I appreciate it. So I don't. I hope you did not feel that. Okay, he is
Like,
pushing me
oh
here
shit, I've dug
into.
myself a hole here. No, it's okay. I think it's good to add a little spice of polarization. I'm sure
No,
there are some
no.
people that maybe lost some respect for me there. So I hope your listeners will forgive me
Yeah.
for for
That,
my
yeah,
humanity.
yeah. No, and that's the point here. I think you have given people a lot of great things, so that's fine. That there are maybe some things that they are not that happy with. That's all good. Um, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So, as you said, we all have our light and dark, and that's part of what makes us human. Lawrence, music is very important for me, so that's why I not always try to, not also try to have musical guests, and um, that I'm a little bit biased towards if I have them. I have to admit that. But I also have always question about music, and the music question is: if I ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that, for a big part, embodies what you are about, which song or piece of music would that be, and why?
Mm, mm, mm. Well, there's the first song that came to mind is a song called "The Power Is Here Now" by Alexia Chilin. Do you know that song?
No, I don't think so.
Anyway, it's a very kind of like deep and moody song, but it's
Hmm.
basically about love and presence. And it's a very moving song. We play it often at the end of our courses or our workshops. And there's just something about it that makes my skin tingle every time I listen to it. It just sounds like a profound prayer to, um, to the truth of life.
Do you? No, yeah. Asking then further on about that song. When you think about love, do you think about life, or do you think about Natasha? Do you think what is it?
Um, for me, love is the innate oneness of life. Um, when you let go of separation, right? If there is no separation, um, there's just being. Right? There's just that being in its entirety, and uh, for me, love is the nature of that being. Right? Love is the nature of just the recognition of that anything that I perceive to be other than me um, is also me, and in that relationship to it, uh, everything changes as a particularly when that becomes a direct experience, the innate oneness of life that um, and there's something really interesting in the you could say in the building blocks of creation. If you think about, say, like a maternal situation, that you know when there when you have a sense of safety and love, there's a willingness to separate, right? That it's the condition of safety and love that creates the possibility of separation. If you think about all of creation, right? Everything is a form of separation. Like I have a glass of water here that I perceive to be distinct from me. I have a keyboard, a computer. Everything is separate from me. But the conditions that allow that the separation of form are are love and safety. Um, Unfortunately, when you have separation, as soon as you have separation, you have something that is not you. And when you have something that is not you, you have something to be afraid about. There's there's the possibility of fear. As long as there's just the one thing, there's no fear. And so there's something very primal in this oscillation um, between love and fear. Because when you have love, you have safety, you have the conditions for separation. When you have creative separation, you have the conditions for fear. But when you recognize love, you restore that unity and that oscillation between love and fear. Just recognizing that fear is um, is simply an expression of love in a way, of simply an expression of the condition of separation that allows us to have this thing called life, right? This thing called life, as far as this version of it, um, is the experience of separation that I get to interact with you having this podcast, right? You as in not me. And maybe in that I can experience fear that I'm saying something wrong, or that your listeners will not like something I said, or that I come across as silly or stupid, right? And but all of these are part of this, right? The underlying experience of love that allows for that separation to be experienced. That then creates this experience of fear that I can embrace in a wholeness, that I can embrace in a restoration of identity, of who I am, which is that I you know that I am because you are, that it is your presence, your experience, that my experience of you that allows me to have this experience of me, right? That it is the all these things around me that create the boundary of who I am and allow me to experience who I am. So for me, love is that awareness, that intrinsic impossibility of separation, that there cannot be an experience of me without you. And when I become present to that, when I become present to that, there cannot be an experience of anything in the world, without that other side, that they're fundamentally the same, interwoven, right? That restores the awareness of love, right? That singularity of being.
Um, uh, Thanks for that, Lawrence. Maybe a crazy question though. While I was listening to you, I don't know why I came up with this question, and I did definitely not send it to you beforehand. Um, Maybe it was because I wanted to ask a question about Sutra. Why you came up with that name. But if you think about communication, um, you know, what is your favorite go-to communication channel tool? Is that talking? Is that coding? Or what is it?
Receiving, like this is um what the fundamental breakdown on this planet is, the capacity to truly receive another person, and this isn't just a um, mental or auditory orientation. It's the full embodied being with the reception of the full experience within the emptiness of who I am. That is relationship. That is communication. That I'm communing with you. That I'm becoming one with you by receiving you um, in in the experience of my awareness.
These conversations always go fast, Lorenz. But before I thank you, is there any question that I did not ask you today that I should have asked you?
I don't know. What's my favorite color?
What is your favorite color?
Pink.
Pink.
Yeah, if you ever see me at Burning Man, I'm always wearing, I have
Okay. Yeah.
large collection of pink accessories and clothes.
Cool. Yeah, it's a question that I asked to my kids actually and their girlfriends a week ago, I think. And I can't tell you why yet because they don't listen to my podcast a lot, but then they will, if I tell you why, then they know what they're going to get for Christmas. So I can't reveal that yet, why I asked this question. Hey, thank you so much for, your willingness to talk with me, for what you do, for who you are. And I really would like to encourage people to check out, your website and to see. I mean, I think you have been able through, the platform that you have developed, and I don't know if that's the right terminology for it, to attract a, great community of people that, so it's really inspiring to see that, by you providing tools and what's happening as a result of that. So that's one. And second, the way you communicate with your, quote unquote clients, is, that's really refreshing and stimulating. So I applaud you for that. So people check out the website, which is Lorenz.
Sutra.co.
Okay. So thanks a lot and all the best with what you do.
Thank you. Great conversation. Really appreciate having a chance to go deep into these philosophical nooks and crannies. So thanks a lot for inviting me.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks. Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.